My guest for this episode is Taye, who was born on the small island of Jersey, one of several British self-governing offshore islands. She came with her family to Australia aged 3, but her family returned when she was 13, a temporary visit that lasted 15 years. In this episode, we have the chance to talk about some of the differences and similarities between Jersey and Tasmania, two really quite different islands in many ways, but still with some things in common. And Taye also has quite a family tale from the time when the German army occupied the island during World War II, an event that left an indelible mark on the collective memory of the island community.
I was born in Jersey in the Channel Islands, and my father was from Victoria, and when I was 3 we moved to Victoria where we lived for 10 years. And then when I was 13 my parents went on a 3-month holiday to America and then going to see Jersey to see my grandparents, and my brother and I couldn't remember any of our time there, and we said goodbye to our friends, we'll see you in 3 months, and life changed very quickly and we stayed there for 15 years. So as a 13-year-old I was plucked out of Australia and plonked back into Jersey, my homeland where my mum was born as well, and my Jersey grandparents and my Jersey family were there.
What was that transition like for you at that age?
It was very challenging, I think. We didn't know it was going to happen, so it wasn't a premeditated thing. My dad was a builder, so we'd moved quite a lot. So I think I was lucky that I was used to moving. It was certainly challenging. A lot of Australian stereotypes. They thought I could surf and went to school on the back of a kangaroo, and we lived in country Victoria, miles away from the beach, and certainly didn't go to school on the back of kangaroos.
What was that transition like for you at that age?
It was very challenging, I think. We didn't know it was going to happen, so it wasn't a premeditated thing. My dad was a builder, so we'd moved quite a lot. So I think I was lucky that I was used to moving. It was certainly challenging. A lot of Australian stereotypes. They thought I could surf and went to school on the back of a kangaroo, and we lived in country Victoria, miles away from the beach, and certainly didn't go to school on the back of kangaroos. I started off in one school, a public school, which was mixed. I'd always gone to a mixed school in Australia, and I found probably that quite challenging. It was just very different to Australian schooling. And then my parents put me into an all-girls school, which I was much more comfortable and thrived, and I still have friends from there to this day, which was quite a number of years ago now. Once we changed to there, then I settled in much better.
And what were the differences compared to Australia?
I just remember big cafeterias, and we didn't have that in Australia, big lining up with your tray, and it was just totally different to what we had. We'd have maybe a lunch order on a Friday and sit outside, and I just remember having a tray and just these big hall rooms, and very different.
And you said you had some family in Jersey already?
Yes.
Yeah. And did that sort of help the adjustment process, I suppose? Did you have a lot to do with them?
Yeah, so my grandparents still lived there, and all my mum's cousins and my great aunt and uncles were there. So we'd spend lots of Christmas and Easter and birthdays, and we'd have, them over, or they would come to all our special occasions, and we spent a lot of time, with them over the years.
So they were, your mum's family was kind of like a multi-generational Jersey family, rather than sort of newcomers.
No, we're not newcomers. We're originally French, but from many generations back. But my grandparents were Jersey born as well.
And I guess like Tasmania, just from what I've gathered, that the kind of industries you can work at in Jersey are a bit limited. Is that?
Definitely. So I think finance is our biggest industry. So it's huge. The whole of St Helier is shops and then offices above, lots of international banks and things like that, and trust companies there. There is tourism. I think in my mum's time, tourism was a lot more. A lot of people would come over for honeymoons and things like that, whereas now it's cheaper to go to Spain for guaranteed sun than coming to Jersey. Probably a bit like if you're from Melbourne, would you come to Tassie for guaranteed sun or go to Queensland? You know, it's that sort of same situation. And then there's agriculture. So we have Jersey potatoes that they grow on the side of hills, and they cover them with frack, which is a type of seaweed. So even my 93-year-old granddad would go with his little trailer down to the beach and gather seaweed to put on his potatoes. He had a very keen garden.
And so I was thinking, like, is it like in Tasmania, obviously the thing, is with young people, they're often thinking to leave the island at some stage. They look at leaving because there aren't the always the pathways they want to go on here. Is that similar in Jersey? Or are there sort of pathways for people to go on other than finance?
If you don't want to be in finance, there's no pathway.
Yeah, right.
And if you don't want to be a farmer. So, and to go to university, you have to go to England.
Yep.
I think there is Highlands College now that maybe do some kind of TAFE university courses, but that's a more new thing. My youngest brother goes to Lancashire University, and all of my friends went away to go to university, and a lot of them do come back.
Yep.
And regardless of what you've studied at university, you usually end up coming back and working in finance.
Yeah.
Because it's quite an expensive island, so housing is quite expensive, and living is more expensive than England as well. It's certainly much cheaper in England to be able to live and buy a house. So you kind of need that steady income.
And I guess like Tasmania, I'm just from what I've gathered that the kind of industries you can work at in Jersey are a bit limited. Is that
definitely? So I think finance is our biggest industry, so it's huge. The whole of St Helier is shops and then offices above, lots of international banks and things like that, and trust companies there. There is tourism. I think in my mum's time, tourism was a lot more. A lot of people would come over for honeymoons and things like that, whereas now it's cheaper to go to Spain for guaranteed sun than coming to Jersey. Probably a bit like if you're from Melbourne, would you come to Tassie for guaranteed sun or go to Queensland? You know, it's that sort of same situation. And then there's agriculture. So we have Jersey potatoes that they grow on the side of hills, and they cover them with frack, which is a type of seaweed. So even my 93-year-old granddad would go with his little trailer down to the beach and gather seaweed to put on his potatoes. He had a very keen garden.
And so I was thinking, like, is it like in Tasmania, obviously the thing, is with young people, they're often thinking to leave the island at some stage. They look at leaving because there aren't the always the pathways they want to go on here. Is that similar in Jersey? Or are there sort of pathways for people to go on other than finance?
If you don't want to be in finance, there's no pathway.
Yeah, right.
And if you don't want to be a farmer. So, and to go to university, you have to go to England.
Yep.
I think there is Highlands College now that maybe do some kind of TAFE university courses, but that's a more new thing. My youngest brother goes to Lancashire University, and all of my friends went away to go to university, and a lot of them do come back.
Yep.
And regardless of what you've studied at university, you usually end up coming back and working in finance.
Yeah.
Because it's quite an expensive island, so housing is quite expensive, and living is more expensive than England as well. It's certainly much cheaper in England to be able to live and buy a house. So you kind of need that steady income.
What was sort of the community like in Jersey? Is it a place where it's very close knit, or is there a transient sort of population as well?
No, I'd say it's very close knit. You know, there might be seasonal workers that would come over to work in hotels and things like that, but I think it's a very close knit community. You know, everyone has their children going through schooling, and once they've settled, I think they've settled into work and life, and generally stay on. Maybe in retirement they might think about moving to France or Spain or England or something, but for the most part they're a steady community.
And are there local traditions that are specific to Jersey? Because I remember hearing a few interesting ones from the Isle of Man that were relating to the Viking history, I suppose.
Okay. I don't think we have Viking history. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone that's listening.
It was apparently the name Jersey is this is my research. Is a Viking.
Oh, well,
from
there
a
you
Viking
go.
origin.
Yeah. Our traditions, we have a Jersey Battle of Flowers, so which is a big festival that's been going for, I think, 100 years now, where they have floats that line the streets and are all covered in flowers. So that's something that happens every August, and it happens on the second Thursday in August, or it used to. I think they have just changed it. And the law is it never rains on Battle Day. And each parish has a girl that represents that parish. So I was actually Miss St Martin in 1997, many years ago. Okay. So I got to ride on one of the floats and wave to everyone in the crowd. So, I think that's a big day for the island. Probably the other one is Liberation Day, when we were liberated from the Second World War, which is May the 9th. So it's the 81st year this May coming of the war. So I think that's, a day where a lot of the islanders would remember. We're probably ticking over now into times where we don't have as many older people, but we definitely grew up with stories. Both my grandparents were alive and living on the island during the Second World War when the Germans occupied. We would listen to lots of stories from my grandparents' times and what they went through.
And what do they remember from that period?
My grandfather was 19 and his father was a lighthouse keeper, so there's one lighthouse on Jersey called Corbier Lighthouse. So that's a really special place for my family, and that's where he grew up, down in the cottages there. And consequently, when I was back in Jersey last year, I realised that I was pregnant, and I took my husband down to Corbier Lighthouse and told him there that I was carrying a Tasmanian baby on the island. So that was a really special thing. But going back to my grandfather, he was 19 and was asked to make guns, or to help clean or make guns, and he refused, and he was actually put in prison. And being 19, you're a little bit courageous, and he actually escaped from prison and managed to jump down from the walls and shattered both of his ankles when he jumped, but he had boots on, and he managed to stagger up a hill and knew somebody up there, and they couldn't shelter him. People were terrified to be sheltering somebody who had escaped from prison. But this man the wife was trying to take his boots off, and he said, no, if I take them off, my feet will swell and I'll never get them back on. But they gave him a cigarette and an apple, and he didn't smoke. But he had no papers on him, and when he was carried on walking, he got to a checkpoint where there was a German soldier who was going to ask for his papers, but he just thought about the cigarette, and he just brazenly walked up to him and said, have you got a light? And the man lit his cigarette and let him through, which, saved his life, and he kept on staggering through. And in those days, you didn't leave your area. He grew up in St Brellards, which is in the west southern corner, so he wouldn't have necessarily gone 5 miles to town that often in, the 30s and 40s. So he knew a vague direction of where he was going, but he couldn't go to the coast because that's where a lot of the soldiers were. So going through backfields, and he ended up exhausted and fell into a bush and was half passed out, and he heard this bike cycling past, and he looked out, and it was one of his school friends, Andre Lagustumier. And he'd always told this story, when I was young, and I never really paid that much attention. But when I went back for his 90th birthday in 2015, I really asked him, what happened? What did you do? And I said, well, what happened to that boy? And he said, you'll see him tonight. He's coming to my birthday. So still, till they were 90, they stayed friends. And his family hid him in a farm. They lived very remote, and his mum was French, an old French woman, and she had a poultice and a big sort of special potions, and she wrapped his legs, and they hid him in a barn. And they got word to his brother and mother that he was alive. But the Germans used to come and knock on her door multiple times a week saying, where is he? And she would say, you've sent him to France, and she'd shout and carry on when she knew that he was alive. To the day he died, he still credited his mum for, keeping him alive. And his brother ended up going like one of those French films with a big pile of hay in a wheelbarrow and put him inside and ran him home to get him home.
Wow.
And they, I still can't picture what it looked like in my head, but they made a little room under the linen cupboard. It had like a trap door, and he actually was down there in hiding for about 9 months until the end of the war. And his mum knew that he needed to keep busy, and she taught him how to knit. So he'd knit babies' booties, and he was a really good motorbike rider, and it was a sand racing champion. And he made himself a leather jacket out of the lining out of a car seat.
Yeah, wow.
And later in life, I found out that he made my grandma's maternity dresses and things. I said, "You could have been a fashion designer, Granddad."
Wow.
So he was very resourceful.
Yeah.
And lovely hearing more and listening. So he died in 2020. So my parents moved back over there to be with him, and they're still there now, 7 years later. So that's why I've been back multiple times in the last few years as well. So still got my Jersey connection. So yeah, it's nice to keep the stories alive and remember them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by the sounds of it, that's sort of still commemorated.
Yeah.
In Jersey.
Yeah, this year was the 80th. Last year was the 80th anniversary, and they have big parades, and where the Palm d'Or, where Winston Churchill came out and said our dear Channel Islands will also be freed. They still do like reenactments and that there, because England got liberated the day before, but because of the tides they couldn't come to Jersey until the following day. So That's why we're a day after everyone else. We had to wait another day. But yeah, there's always parades and flags and bunting, and yeah, they'll do lots of street parties and things like that. And because it was a big celebration this year, there was actually a thing on Facebook: if you live in another country, we'll send flags to you. So I actually wrote, and they sent some, so I put them up in my house in Glenhuon on Liberation Day.
And so when you were growing up there in your teens, did you imagine that you were going to stay there for the rest of your life, or at least long term?
No, I left school when I was 17 and went and worked in a bank. That was our natural progression, living on the island. So I went and worked at Lloyd's Private Bank, and I knew that wasn't what my career path was going to be. And I was very fortunate that my parents paid for me to go to England, and I studied beauty therapy in Leeds. And I specifically chose the Yorkshire College of Beauty Therapy because they did an international qualification, and I knew that one day I would come back to Australia. So I could have studied at a TAFE in Jersey and just had a British qualification, but I had a deep feeling that I would come back to Australia, so I chose the international qualification.
What was the reason for that, or the thinking behind that?
We had come back as a family in 2005 to Australia on a holiday, and we came back in 2006, and then in 2007 my parents and my 3 brothers, by this point, they adopted 2 boys, came back to Australia to live. So we moved back to Victoria, and that's when I first came to Tassie. So I came, my parents moved back to Victoria, and I came to work at Cradle Mountain at the day spa. So I said to Mum and Dad, I'm going to Tassie for 6 months, and moved to Cradle Mountain and worked and had a wonderful time, had a wonderful season in Tasmania. And that was my first time. My dad had come bushwalking here when he was 15, 16 and always talked about it, and done the Overland Track and Frenchman's Cap and lots of other places. So I'd always heard about it, and something drew me down. So I went back and travelled up to the islands, worked on Dunk Island, and then sort of made my way back down. I did a couple of ski seasons at Thredbo and Falls Creek, and I worked out of Sydney at a luxury lodge. And when I was in Cradle Mountain, there was talk of Saffire on the East Coast being built, this ultra-luxe hotel. And I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to work there, and I'd actually written to the general manager before it was even open saying I want to come and work. And I'd done some experience in Walgan Valley, and that kind of gave me that feel for that kind of property. And when I was working at Falls Creek, the job came up at Saffire, and I just knew that I wanted to come back, and that was in 2012. And I said to my mum again, going back to Tassie, it's my last hurrah, my last job, going for 6 months, and that'll, scratch the itch of travelling and working. And I came in 2012 and I've never left.
Yeah. And what work were you doing all this time with these?
So beauty therapy and massage, I worked as a casual therapist, and then I got made up to full-time, so I stayed on, and then they asked me to be manager, and then, so I ended up being there for 6 years all up. So
And what was that experience like?
Amazing. It was the pinnacle of my career. So I loved it, absolutely loved. I loved working there, the surroundings, meeting all the beautiful guests, living in Coles Bay. You know, I was so fortunate to have lived in two iconic places in Tasmania, Cradle Mountain and Coles Bay, and just being able to explore the area and bushwalk on your days off. And we absolutely loved living there. It was so beautiful. My husband also ended up working there. We'd met and he ended up coming and working. And we'd got married and I'd had a bit of a medical thing, and we knew that we wanted a bit of real life. It was amazing working there, but we had a core staff and then a lot of transient staff. Mm-hmm. So I'm very lucky now that I've got lots of friends around the world and, you know, people that have come. And as I said, I've stayed in contact with a lot of people. This last year we met two French girls that used to work. One worked for me and one worked in a different department that we visited when we were in Europe. But it's very transient. So it's quite hard, again, making new friends every year. You know, after 6 years, you kind of want that community. And getting married, we wanted to start a family. We thought, right, now it's the time that we need to move to Hobart or closer down south to a little bit more real life. I wanted a break, so I came and worked down in Huonville. I worked at Total Eye Care for a year in an optical place, and it was quite apparent that it wasn't my forte. So after that, I ended up working at the Endota Spa in Hobart for 4.5 years. So back in my area of expertise, if you will. My husband's family were down in the Huon Valley and he could work out in the bush, which he'd done before. So, it served us well, and we bought a house down here and settled and started creating a life. But it's funny, a lot of our friends were ex-Saffire that had moved to Hobart. Okay. So, I think finding that Huon Valley friendship was hard to start with. Yeah. We certainly had a lot of blow-ins, if you want to call us that have come down to Tassie. So when we moved to Glen Huon, and there was like a little historical society or something at the hall that I found out about, and I thought I'll go along because we have a very small property surrounded by farm, and it just seemed unusual that we had such a small block. I wondered if it was like a single mum that had been given this land. So I went into the hall, opened the door. It was almost like a creaking situation, or like, and these older people just turned and looked their head and looked at me as if I had 3 heads. And they were somewhat friendly, but I never went back. Yeah. So they were sort of like, who is she? Who's this newcomer come along to our thing?
But has the area changed since you've been there? Because it does seem like there's more new people down there.
I think so. Well, I think I've changed as well. Okay. I think we were very fortunate to have a baby last year, and so now I've got to know the Huon Valley in a different way through mothers and integrated that way. So that's been a huge change. Rather than just working down there or living down there and working in town, now I'm sort of around so much more. So that's been a huge change, getting to know a lot of different people. Again, a lot of them have come from interstate that I know. There's not a lot that I know that are born and bred Tasmanians.
How does Tasmania compare with, say, life in Jersey? Like, are there a lot of similarities?
Well, they're both islands, so that's one similarity. I think they're very different. Jersey, although it's very small, they do have a lot of country and a lot of green spaces and a lot of sort of country coastal walks and through the woods and things like that. But we've obviously got a lot more bush and scenery here. Jersey's got a very French feel. A lot of, or all of our road names are in French. Mm-hmm. Even though it's British, it's very much got a French vibe. A lot of restaurants and alfresco eating, and which probably is similar to Hobart, but definitely not down in the Huon Valley. Lots of beautiful beaches, and we have beautiful beaches here in Tasmania as well. Some similarities, but some differences as well.
There does seem to be quite a lot of commonalities with just living on an island, but then every island's a bit different, and Tasmania's quite a big island, really, and mountainous, and would have very different terrain to Jersey, I guess.
Well, I think even Jersey from east to west is different. You sort of favour one side over the other, or, the west has big rolling surf waves and a big long beach, where the east is a bit more rocky and sheltered bays and things, so...
And is Jersey a bit close to France than
Yes.
England?
Yeah. On a clear day, you can see the cars driving along in France. You can see the sun glinting off their windscreen. And then other days it'll be so foggy you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Yeah, right.
And you were asking me about the little islands. There's a little hamlet of islands called the Ecrahos. And again, some days you can see them as plain as day, and others you wouldn't even know they're there. It's a very interesting island. We have a huge tidal range as well, so we have 40-foot tides, so when the tide goes out the island expands, and it catches out a lot of the holiday makers that drive down the slipway to the beach thinking they can park and think that their car's going to be safe, and then turn around multiple hours later and their car's half underwater.
And so by the sounds of it, you still stay connected with people from Jersey that you grew up with?
Yeah. As I said, ones came out just this year. In 2024, we went over for my best friend's wedding. She lives in Jersey. Her family are French, and she ended up getting married in France. So I went over to be her bridesmaid. We've been friends since we were about 17, and my parents are there, and other people from school. And when I was working over there, because I was 28 when I came back to Australia, so I still, have a lot of friends that I grew up with and went out with, and my going out time and things like that. So, yeah, really strong connection still over there through. And it's so easy these days with social media or WhatsApp and, video calling, or, I can... It's good. I'm an early riser, so I can ring in the morning and it's their evening, so it's easy for me to call.
So you came to Australia at 28, and what were you in Jersey that whole time from 13 to 28?
Yeah. Apart from going to England to study, lived in Jersey that whole time. I had travelled a bit. Well, I travelled quite a lot in my late teens and early 20s through Africa and South America. And Jersey's very fortunate. They have an overseas aid project, and they send 3 teams away every year to different countries. So I went on 2 school building trips to Uganda back in probably 2003 and about 2005 or 6. So that's a really nice thing that they do. We fundraise and collect money. So when one of the school trips, we wanted to give books for the school, but we wanted to give supplies like needles and syringes and things like that to the medical centre. And then a lot of the children didn't have food when they went to school in the morning, so we put money into creating a farm so then they could make food and the children could eat at least 1 meal a day, and that would help with their education. So Jersey does a lot of projects and things for other countries as well, because it is, a wealthy island. They want to give back to everyone else, and we would go around the pubs and clubs we get paid monthly. And so we'd go on the last Friday when everyone had got paid, and it was easier to get a bit of fundraising money, shaking a bucket out of somebody who'd had a few drinks. So, there was always the ones of, why don't you help us first? But I think you've always got to help others.
And so you had the opportunity to go to some of these places?
Yeah, so I went to Mufumi in the northeast of Uganda the first time, and then Luwero, which was more in the centre. So, we'd go for a month at a time and do bricklaying and concrete mixing and make these classrooms for schools and a library as well. So it was a great experience.
And what did you what did you learn from that, I suppose?
I actually remember standing in line waiting for a coffee outside the bank that I worked in, and there was one person working. It was a little round cafe, like a little thing in the middle of the street, and people were standing there tutting and waiting and impatient, and I just thought, my gosh, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, we are so lucky. We've got a job to go to. We've got money in our pocket. We can buy a frivolous thing like coffee, and we're so ungrateful. Whereas these people that in Uganda, they had nothing. And one of the days it was raining, and for some reason only the preps were in school. Everyone else was on holidays, but I don't know why. There's just the preps were at school. And so we dived into one of the empty classrooms, And there was me and another girl and two little girls, and we were playing those clapping games. We were dredging up these songs from our primary school days that we were, trying to remember, and we were just messing around waiting for the storm to finish, because they would come through in the afternoon pretty quick and then they'd be gone. And the next day these two little girls came and gave us an orange each, and I just thought, my gosh, you've got nothing, yet you're so willing to give something to somebody else. And I think that was, one of the biggest lessons of coming back. I think sometimes going to these places is easy. It's coming back and realising how fortunate you are and how ungrateful you can be with it.
So I guess it does give you a sense of perspective, doesn't it?
Oh, hugely. Huge sense of perspective. Yeah, it makes you realise their sense of community. They had a real strong sense of community and looking out for each other, and, they certainly did have huge challenges as well, but, really community-minded. And I think sometimes, you can live in a community and be community-minded, but are you really? There's different levels of community, I think, and they had a very strong sense of community.
Because I guess in some cases your mutual survival and just getting on, being able to have a decent life is depending on being community-centred, because you all depend on each other. Yeah,
and I think, probably we were here in 2019 when the bushfires were on. And, when you're standing in the PCYC at Huonville with, 500, 600 other people, that's when it's community. And, you're all looking out for each other, and you see your neighbours and you're like, right, I know you're here and I'll keep an eye out for you. And I think when the chips are down, that's when our community sort of level comes up. Il existe un petit coin renommé par tout le monde,
And so after that was when you started working in the finance industry for a while in Jersey. Yeah. And how long did you do that for?
I worked on and off. I was very fortunate. I had a good boss that would let me go travelling. So I would go off for 5 months, and I would go to Africa and around Zimbabwe and South Africa and Swaziland and Namibia and Botswana, and then I'd come back and I'd work, for 6 more months and save. And I would work, actually where the bank was upstairs, there was a beauty therapy salon, so I'd work in the nights, a couple of nights a week, save, and then I'd go travelling again. So then I'd go to South America and Argentina and Chile and Bolivia, Peru and Ecuador, and have an amazing time, come back with probably 10p in my pocket, and then back to work, back at the bank, and, save again. So I've always kind of been a bit of famine and feast, work hard when I need to, and then go and spend it all travelling.
Oh, it's good to be able to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad, I became a mother very late in life. It was a dream that we wished would have happened earlier, but it didn't. And so I'm very grateful now that I've had my beautiful experiences travelling. I've had an amazing career, the pinnacle of my career working at Saffire, and now I still work now, but now I'm into my motherhood era in Tasmania.
Yeah. What's this sort of new phase, let's call it, been like so far?
Amazing. It has been a dream come true, an absolute dream that we never, we wished 1,000 wishes for, but it just wasn't ever seeming like it was ever going to come to fruition. And as I said, I went to Jersey not realising that I was smuggling a little Tasmanian, and it was very poignant that it was in my granddad's house that I did my pregnancy test, and that, as I said, I could go down to the lighthouse, which is a very special place for my family, and tell my husband, and I can always show her where she was first known about. But then when we did it, because I'm older, I had to have more tests, and we knew what she was going to be earlier. So, we went down to Kingston Beach and did our little finding out whether she was going to be a girl or a boy, and found out we're having a girl. So, we've got our special place in Tasmania and our special places in Jersey.
Yeah, so she's already kind of been to Jersey then.
Yeah. And we watch things on the TV of different places, around Switzerland or Monaco or France, and we're like, oh, you've been there, in my tummy. Yeah. So hopefully one day she'll get to go to Jersey and see her grandparents over there, and my school friends, and see where her ancestors came from.
Yeah, because I often ask people, because for some people it's more important than others, but just how much of your heritage and you'd like to see passed on to your daughter, or for her to know about, I suppose.
Yeah, I definitely especially keeping my grandparents' stories alive. I'm very lucky. My grandfather particularly was interviewed many times during his life because his story was so unusual with escaping and surviving. And his story will always live on. But my grandma as well, she lived there and always credited her life to the Red Cross and the Red Cross parcels that came to Jersey at the end of the war. And yeah, even down to her final days, she was sort of thanking them. So yeah, I think you always want to remember and carry on the traditions and things. So.
Il existe un petit coin renommé par tout le monde, où éclairé dont guetteront atterri. Il n'y a aucun pays qui peut fournir ce négat, car non